So many of you have asked this question in various formats for quite a long time, and I figured why not just do a thought experiment? And so this question is, how would you make money in a post-labor economy if artificial intelligence and artificial superintelligence renders human intelligence irrelevant? So I took everything that I know about economics and everything that I predict about post-labor economics and all that fun stuff, and I put it together and I ran a thought experiment. And I did this thought experiment with a combination of deep research, Grok, and Claude. So I used all the AI, all the smartest AI that exists today to try and figure this out. So this is kind of the goal, which is like fusion reactors on the moon. That's how you become a trillionaire. So let's lay out the framework. So, what are the base assumptions that I made about how the economy of the future will work in order to become a trillionaire? So, first and foremost, cognitive hyperabundance. If you assume that everyone is going to have AGI and ASI, and sure, the capital owners are going to have access to more, but at the same time, you look at how smart these models are, we're going to have open source ASI within 10 to 20 years. And at a certain point, I do still believe that you get diminishing returns, meaning at a certain point, if it's smart enough to invent a fusion reactor, you don't really need to be that much smarter. Especially if you're just doing basic stuff like, running a coffee shop or, running a mining operation on the moon. So then the models get smaller, faster, and cheaper, meaning literally everyone's going to have AGI and ASI everywhere. So we're going to be at a point of not just cognitive hyperabundance, but cognitive saturation. And what I mean by cognitive saturation is even your smartwatch will be smarter than you. So human intelligence is not going to be a constraint. Next is the principal agent dynamic. So this one is basically a baseline economic principle where you have the concept is that you have economic principles, which is the originator of economic authority and agency and those sorts of things, and then you have agents. And this is in an economic sense, not necessarily in a computer sense, although it works because we're talking about computer agents. So an agent is someone that acts on your behalf, but they're acting for your interest, on your authority, and with your resources and for your resources. So you take that and say, okay, well, if humans are going to stay the principles forever, and basically this is kind of an assumption that I make is, okay, imagine that we end up with tens of millions of agents. They're going to be working for someone, right? Whether it's a human or a company or something. I think in the future you won't even need companies. Like I'm starting to believe more and more that you're not going to need a company. You're just going to need a human, an owner, a principal, an economic principal who owns a bunch of robots and agents, and they go do everything for them. So you're going to be the proprietor and that sort of thing. So think about that model where you have a human in the center and you're surrounded by layers and layers and layers of autonomous AI agents and robots, and that's probably how the economy is going to work in the future. There might still be companies or corporations, but I still think they're going to change dramatically because the optimal number of employees is 0 because humans are expensive. Robotic abundance. So it'll be harder to get to full robotic abundance just because they're electromechanical devices, whereas something that's purely software, granted the software still has to run on hardware somewhere, but my assumption here is that we're going to have millions and then billions of robots before too long, just because when you think about like, okay, we have I think last I checked, like hundreds of millions of cars, if not billions of cars on the road. And cars are very large, right? Cars take a lot more resources than robots. So it's like, okay, well, you have, a 2-ton car or a 200-pound robot. For every 2-ton car, you can make 10 robots. So I think we have the industrial capacity to make a huge amount of robots. So I'm also assuming we're going to have robotic hyperabundance in the future as well. Now, the next thing is property. Property rights are the foundational assumption of economics today. I've read a whole bunch of books. The most recent one was Why Nations Fail, which talks about how important property rights are for functioning societies. And I really believe that we should double down on property rights. And I know some of the ANCAPs out there will be like, yes, but I'm not an ANCAP. So anyways, we can still agree on some things. Broken clocks are right twice a day. And then finally, the last assumption is persistence. So scarcity persistence. There will always be some things that are scarce. Optimal real estate, energy. You're still going to need to be consuming energy even if you can produce more of it. And by the way, energy is one of the things that is susceptible to Jevons paradox, which is the more efficient you make energy, the more uses you find for energy. So paradoxically, the demand for energy goes up, the more efficient it becomes, and the more you produce. Attention, regulatory power, data. I don't really think that data ownership is going to be a thing. I think that we're going to look back and be like, that was a dumb idea. And the reason that I think that data ownership is going to be a dumb idea is because synthetic data, you can just manufacture data from the ether. AI alignment, again, I don't really agree with that, but the AIs were like, oh, this is going to be a valuable, scarce resource. If AI alignment is scarce, we're all dead. I don't think AI alignment is scarce. So I disagree with the AIs here. But who knows? Maybe they're smarter than me already. Physical space and those sorts of things. Okay, so those are the 5 foundational assumptions that I've made for this experiment. So now the experiment that I want to do is, how do you, I just set myself these terms. How would I go from $5? Because one of the things that a lot of people challenge me on is, what if you start with no capital? Obviously, the rule of thumb is it takes money to make money, but what if you're starting with no money? What if you're starting with just UBI and you're barely making ends meet? How do you participate in this economy of the future? So I said, all right, I'm going to go from $5 to $1 trillion in this post-labor economic future. Here's how I do it. Basically a few initial principles and strategies that came up is, number one, capital. So how do you get through the bootstrap paradox? And we'll start there next. And then next is closed ownership loops, which is okay, if property is the primary thing, how do you amplify property over time? Then how do you use network effects? How do you not just amplify the property that you own, but how do you expand over time? And then so on and so forth. And one of the insights that I came up with is that the ability and willingness to cut through red tape will probably actually be a powerful moat. And so what I mean by that is it takes a lot of regulatory hurdles and approvals and all sorts of other things to set up a fusion reactor. A lot of people just won't have the time and patience to do that, because it's you got to argue with the government and get approvals and permits and land deeds and all that other fun stuff. So red tape will actually be something, if you're good at cutting through red tape, that could be a differentiator for people in the future who want to become hyper-capitalists. All right, so with all that being said, let's get to the thought experiment going from $5 to $1 trillion. So phase 1, starting with just $5, what I would do is, once you have access to GPT-6 or whatever, is you say, here's $5, go invest it. And I would say not investing it in one place, but invest it everywhere. Divide that up and invest it in crypto, invest it in microtasks, and all kinds of other stuff. Because again, these models are smarter than you. So you just say, here's $5, go turn it into as much money as you possibly can. The most aggressive investment strategy you can. And by the way, people have already done this. People have taken ChatGPT, and this is older versions, by the way. They're saying, I have $100, make a business. And people made businesses that went from a value of $100 to $50,000 in a week. So the AI can do this. You still need a little bit of creativity, but I think between web search and agents and operators and the computer using agents, I think before too long, you won't need that much creativity. You'll just say, here's $5, here's $10, here's $100, make as much money as you possibly can. Because the thing is on a planet this large, there's always inefficiencies somewhere. And when I say inefficiencies, for most people, that's not going to be intuitive, but the way that you get rich is by exploiting and fixing inefficiencies. So a prime example is Amazon. The inefficiency that Amazon targeted was getting consumer goods to your home. So instead of you have to go to Walmart and go to Target and go to Food Lion, and they're like, what if you just go to Amazon.com and they bring it to you? So that solves an inefficiency in your life. So if you solve someone's inefficiency, you can make a lot of money. So what happens is you start with $5, and your AI agents find all the inefficiencies to solve, and they diversify, and they keep solving all these inefficiencies and making more and more money. And over time, that just magnifies. That just goes up exponentially. So the goal here is to go from $5 to $50,000 within 6 months. Honestly, you could probably do it much faster. You could probably do that in less than a month. Certainly, people have done it with ChatGPT already, so this is conservative. Excuse me. So $5 to $50,000 in 6 months once you have an ASI agent or agents working on your behalf to invest. Okay, cool. Now, most of you would probably be like, wow, I'm perfectly happy with that. All right, moving on. What's phase two? Phase two is once you've got that much capital, you then buy robots. So the robots are going to be expensive. The number that I assumed is that for a luxury, not luxury, but like high end humanoid robot that can do anything, that's really smart, really dexterous, is really durable, can do heavy lifting, all those kinds of things, it would cost probably about $85,000. The reason is the actuators, the sensors, and the batteries are the expensive part, plus the chips. If you're going to have that much intelligence built into it, it's going to need pretty powerful chips as well. So I'm assuming that you'd lease it for about the same that you'd lease for like a luxury car. So somewhere around $900 a month or $85,000 or something along those lines. But anyways, once you buy your first robot, now you have a super intelligent worker that can work around the clock, basically only stopping to charge, or stop to go to like get materials if it needs to do that. Or it can probably honestly just be tethered with an extension cord like the Evangelions were. And if you know, you know. Anyways, so what I do is I'd start with luxury goods, bespoke, individualized luxury goods. And the reason that you start there is because it's high margin. So if you know in the annals of history, the reason that Tesla started with the Roadster is because it was a high margin vehicle. They knew that it was experimental. They knew that it was not going to sell too many, and so they said, okay, well let's take this fancy new technology and we're going to sell something based on novelty, and we're going to sell to rich people. One of the number one rules of making money is sell to people with money, sell to rich people. So we start with this robot, and we're going to say we've already got the market research of fixing inefficiencies and niches. So then what we do is we take this robot and I say, make handmade luxury goods, and we're going to sell them on Etsy or whatever. So just sell handmade luxury things, very high markup because they're going to be really nice, bespoke, those sorts of things. This robot can operate around the clock. And also, by the way, our initial investment agents are still churning out money. So then we buy more robots. So we just build a factory. So I'd end up, renting or buying a warehouse where my robots can just make stuff around the clock, high-end luxury goods around the clock. Maybe we'd get into purses or something, right? We'd go to Paris Fashion Week and sell $50,000 handbags. I don't know, something along those lines. So that's phase two, and that'll take us from $50,000 of capital to $2 million of capital, because luxury goods are a great way to do that. And we're also diversifying. So next is phase three, the retail revolution. So brick and mortar experiences are going to stick around. Imagine a planet Earth with 10 billion people, all of them on UBI. They're going to need something to do during the day. So that means brick and mortar in-person experiences. That's bakeries, bars, cafes, restaurants, arcades, those kinds of things. Daytime entertainment, and social gathering places. So I would start setting up franchises. So the first thing that you do is with $2 million of capital, you can afford to take some risks. Plus, you've already got a fleet of robots, and you can buy more robots. So it's like, oh, hey, let's start a bakery. Let's start a nice, cozy bakery that in a small town somewhere, and it's going to be the best bakery in town, and everyone's going to want to go there. And then in the next town over, you start a bar, and in the next town over, you start a cafe, and then you start a restaurant and an arcade and all kinds of stuff. And so each of these establishments will be, run by a few robots. Once you have the money to put them in bigger cities, they can run 24/7. So you have stores and experiences that are open constantly, because again, in this future, nobody's working, so people are going to be bored. People are going to want stuff to do. People are going to want to have, social places to hang out. And these start generating a lot of revenue. Now, the margins on these kinds of things are thinner, but you're building up a base of capital. And plus, with all these experiments, you can find the niches that really generate good returns. Some of those might be like axe throwing places and escape rooms and whoever else, right? Rock climbing gyms. There's all kinds of things that you can do that are brick and mortar experiences. And then, by the way, because we've already got a fleet of online agents, we've got marketing and advertising on lockdown. So then what that gets us up to $50 million. Now, I will say this one might take a little bit longer. It depends on how much leverage we have in terms of debt. So we'll probably be taking out a little bit more debt at this point. But the revenue from the brick and mortar things can service that debt easily while we're building a base of capital. So then, Phase 4 is, we'll get to Phase 4. I just want to plug all of my links real quick. It's all available on Linktree in the description. So I'm over on, you're on my main channel here. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Substack. I'm on Patreon. I've also got the podcast on Spotify. So if you want to listen in the car, it's the same episodes. I've got my New Era Pathfinders, my learning community, and lots of other stuff. I've also got a merch store coming. So a good friend of mine is a phenomenal designer, and we've been kicking around ideas. And so the merch store is coming, and it's going to have a lot of really great stuff. You'll start to see me wear it on the channel. One of the things is like a systems thinking cap, and then the other is like an AI maximalist T-shirt. So we've got lots of cool stuff going. If you want to identify and help spread the word that AI is cool. All right, moving on. Phase 4 is energy. So once you get good at brick and mortar, so there's a reason that it's following in this order, because let me just outline this real quick. This is permissionless. Investments, you just give an agent $5. You don't need any infrastructure, nothing physical. The next one is this is your first investment in something physical, is a humanoid robot. So it's like, okay, let me get used to working with humanoid robots in the real world. Phase 3 is now you're investing in stores, right? That's a really well-established thing, but you're getting used to that regulatory red tape and working with business operations that are not purely digital. And so then you get to the next level, which is building solar. So solar is a very good place to start because it's got relatively simple startup. You just need a few approvals, you need some land, and you need solar panels. And it has very low OpEx, very low operational expenses. So I'd probably start with a co-op entry. So basically going in and building a solar farm with some partners. But then as you get better at that, you start building more and more solar farms. Why? Because everyone's going to need energy. And what I would probably do is, depending on how the numbers played out, I would build them and sell them, or build them and hold them and then just collect the money from the basically producing energy from the sun. Probably a little bit of both, depending on how each farm was performing. But the idea here is you just become a solar baron, right? You just build as much solar as you can, sell as much solar as you can. And this is going to be scalable because guess what? All those robots that you're running need solar, and all the data centers that are running the AI also need energy. I mean, not specifically solar. They all need energy. And it's relatively clean, and you're going to be helping everyone by producing more clean energy, creating more energy abundance. So then, once you get good at that, you say, okay, well, let me take all of this abundant solar. Let's build the data centers. Instead of just purchasing AGI or ASI that's running in someone else's data center, let's start building data centers. Why? Because this is the factory of the future. You see like the Industrial Revolution and back in the Victorian and steampunk, when it's like the capitalists were the factory owners. Data centers are the new factories, right? This is where productivity happens. So I would start building brand new data centers all over the world. Why? Because particularly I'd focus on data centers where solar was the cheapest, but all over. And you build data centers. They don't have to be gigantic, but you'd build a lot of them because why? Everyone's going to be running AI. Everyone's going to need cloud AI, and these data centers would be full of nothing but GPUs. And of course, the servers required to run, the web servers and stuff, but it would be mostly GPUs. Yeah, and that's what I would do. So then you scale up from solar to the data centers. And by the way, with the vertical integration, my solar is powering my data centers, so the energy is basically free, except for making sure that the solar farms are up and operational. And so then this would probably take a little bit longer, but I'm also assuming that we have robotic hyperabundance, meaning once you pull the trigger, you can build it really fast because AI can help you get through all the red tape, and your army of robots can help you build it really fast. So that's phase 5, which gets us from $500 million to $5 billion. So we're a billionaire now after about 4 years. Wait, no, 7 years. 6 or 7 years. And so then by now, I'm assuming that we've figured out fusion. So with all of that revenue that I'm getting from my solar fields, from my data centers, from my brick and mortar chains, by the way, all of those are still business units that are expanding on their own. So then, with all of that revenue, I would say let's start building some commercial fusion reactors, because I'm assuming that all the startups are going to have figured it out by then. And so now I'm going to get in and say I've got the capital to build compact fusion reactors wherever they need to go. And again, the Jevons paradox, the more energy you produce, the more people need it, because the more we find uses for it. So investing in energy futures, that is going to be a great investment strategy portfolio in the long run, because we always need energy. And by the way, until we invent antimatter reactors, fusion is probably going to be the pinnacle of our energy production. I mean, there's like antimatter and 0 point energy, and I don't know, there might only be two scales of energy above that. Who knows? We don't know what we're going to find out. But what we're going to do is we're going to build these fusion reactors, and we're going to be the fusion barons. So we're going to go from solar to data centers to fusion, and this will take us from $5 billion to $100 billion easily, if not more. The market return there is pretty straightforward. Fusion changes everything. You sell energy, you make energy, again, the more energy that humans use, the more we get addicted to it. So this market is never being exhausted. Phase 7, this is where we get to the $1 trillion mark. So with all of that extra money, I would either buy a bunch of SpaceX ships, because Elon Musk is planning to scale up to like 1,000 starships a year, or even just start my own competitor. Who knows? Who cares? At that point, you can do whatever you want. But what I would then do is, instead of just trying to get to the moon or get to Mars, I would go to the asteroid belt. And the reason is because there are entire asteroids that are mostly made of metals, and particularly very high value metals like iridium and platinum. There's a lot of gold. There's so many hyper valuable materials out there in the asteroid belt. And by the way, there's also lots of helium-3 on the moon. So once you get to space, then it's literally and figuratively a gold mine. So then, with all of those billions and billions of dollars, you start harvesting the moon, you start harvesting asteroids, and that gets you to a hyperabundance amount of materials. And also at that point, the human economy, no longer really applies to you, because guess what? You can build robot factories in space. You can build, because guess what there's unlimited amount of in space is solar energy. So you can build your robot factories in space, you can build your shipyards in space, and you just start building everywhere like it's StarCraft, right? Like you don't even need money anymore. So at this point, money basically becomes irrelevant. Now, if you want to take some of those resources back to Earth and sell them on Earth markets, okay, fine. But you basically run the whole economy by this point. And so then I wanted to take it one step further. If you get to this point, if you're running a fleet of asteroid harvesters, what comes next? This is where you start building Wayland. So Wayland is the evil corporation from the Alien franchise, and you build an interstellar empire. So not only do you make sure that you have economic and industrial presence on every celestial body in the solar system, you start colonizing other solar systems. And so then, trillionaire, does the number trillion even mean anything anymore? And so this is really kind of the thought experiment of like, okay, if I wanted to maximize profits, now, will this actually happen? I don't really know. At a certain point, there's no physical laws stopping someone from doing this. Once you have the robots and the spaceships, who's going to stop you, right? Like, is the Earth government going to send a little patrol boat after you? Probably not. So I don't know. Now, you might say, okay, well, what's going to stop anyone else from doing this? So, number one is regulatory navigation. So it's going to take a lot of regulatory hurdles to get from here to there. Even if you had ASI tomorrow, even if you had robots tomorrow, there's a lot of regulatory red tape to get there. Next is vision. Most people are just going to be thinking small potatoes. They're going to say, I'm going to get really good at one thing. I'm saying, no, I'm going to get good at everything. Why? Because my intelligence is not the limiting factor. Only my creativity and vision are the limiting factor. Next is persistence. Is just most people, once you get to, just let's be honest. Most people, you get to $1 million, $10 million, you're not going to care. You're going to be like, do I really need any more money? I've got all the health insurance that I need, or I guess health insurance probably won't go away, or probably will go away. I've got all the health that I need. I'm going to live forever. I can just have fun. Most people are just not going to want to be that wealthy because if you're a millionaire or a billionaire or a trillionaire, does your lifestyle really change that much? Now, to be fair, some people are going to say, well, yeah, because then I can own an epic space yacht. And some people are going to be like, yes, that would be great. It's like, okay, sure, but why don't you just do it in VR? Anyways. Another thing is first mover advantage. If you're the first one out the gate, if you're the first one building that celestial mining company, you're going to have the market cornered, but also space is really big. So I don't know if first mover advantage really would apply that much once you get to space, because again, space is huge. And then finally, there probably will be the top 0.01% is going to be obscenely wealthy. They're all going to be trillionaires, and the vast majority of people won't. But, if you have robots and hyperabundance and post-labor economics lifestyles, are you really going to care? So yeah. All right. Well, that's my thought experiment. Let me know what you think. This was, again, entirely a thought experiment. I did it with the help of a bunch of different AI tools. There's some things that I disagreed with that I took out. So one of the things that the AIs did, because the AIs are ruthless, is they were talking about regulatory capture, and market manipulation. And I'm like, wow, you really, really took that to the dark side. So I actually removed market manipulation, regulatory capture, and those sorts of things from this thought experiment, because I was like, what if we do it ethically, at least as ethically as possible? All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.